Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Shirtless Plantain Show, the Arsenal edition. This is your host, Dean, and per usual, I'm here with Coach. What's going on, Coach?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really, really well. It's a great day.
It's a great day indeed. It is a great day because we're here to do our 25-26 season Arsenal season preview, and we're extremely proud and honored to welcome the doyen of Arsenal podcasting and online blogging, Mr. Andrew Mangan, aka Arseblog. Can we call you Arsblog?
You can call me whatever you want. It's fine. We're all friends here on this podcast.
Well, I will call you the Beyonce of Barry White's because you have the best voice in the history of voices.
I've never been called that before. I will admit that. So yeah, I'm going to take that all day long. Thanks.
Immense that. Well, we've achieved something. So, Coach, I'll throw it back to you for the very first question.
Right. So over the years, Arsenal have been synonymous, I suppose, with not being as active as a transfer window as most people would like. You know, I'd reference the Czech summer, which probably is burned into everyone's memory. You know, I think the summer of 2011 was probably our most active, but because of what we had lost, you know, and whatever else. I just want to know, like, how would you compare this summer? How would you reconcile it with what we experienced with under Arsene Wenger in these mid to latter years?
Oof. I mean, it's been organised, hasn't it? It looks like they had a plan from the start as to what it was they wanted to do and the players that they wanted to bring in and when they wanted to bring them in. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that we did all 6 transfers in July. So 6 transfers in a month. Now, some of the groundwork, for example, for Zubimendi was done months previously, and they had that all lined up. There was the Gyökeres saga, but other deals like Norgard, like Kepa, players we had to bring in to provide depth were done pretty easily, pretty quickly. Madueke as well. I know there's another player we brought in. Oh yeah, Mosquera as well. So, you know, there's sort of a low fuss summer. You know, everybody gets very anxious about transfers and I understand it, and everyone was like freaking out over the striker. Are we going to get the striker? Which striker are we going to get? But everything else has been like zero fuss. And when you've lived through some of the other transfer windows that Arsenal have had over the years, it's a nice change. It is nice, you know, that we're not sort of going into the final couple of weeks of the season trying to bend our minds around some plan that they must have. They must have, and it's like, oh God, maybe they're just making it up as they go along, which I kind of feel was the case in the past. So yeah, it's been very pleasing to get all those deals done and to have the squad in good shape, I think, going into the first game of the season.
Very well said, sir. With that in mind, how do you balance wanting more? Because I feel a lot of us think we still need to do at least one more, probably on the left side, given all the words that have been said about Martinelli and Trossard potentially leaving. How do you balance the fact that you come from a decade, you know, as a veteran fan, we're all veteran fans here, of watching the club not do much with seeing them do a lot this summer, but still wanting more. Do you ever feel a little greedy about that?
I think we all do. You know, everyone loves a new signing. There's something just fundamentally exciting about bringing in a new player, the stories. You know, when you hear, like, let's say Arsenal are in talks with X, Y, or Z, it is exciting, you know, whether you need that player or not. I think we're in a situation now with Arsenal where pretty much everybody would want something else on the left-hand side. But the question is, do we absolutely 100% need something else on the left-hand side? And that's a discussion that will take place, I think, over the final weeks of the window. Some people will say, yes, absolutely, we need a player. We're not short on numbers. That's where I go with this, right? We do have Trossard. We do have Martinelli. We do have Madueke, who can play there, which might also leave a bit of room open for Max Dowman to play on the right-hand side this season. Who knows? So it's not a question of like we're absolutely short. It's not a question of like, oh, Arsenal only have one centre forward and one of them, you know, it's not that. The numbers are there. The issue is like, can we bring in a bit more in terms of quality? Can we provide an upgrade to that position? And from everything we've read, it feels like Arsenal would be open to doing that, but it's just a question of who that player is and who's available and what price that player might command in the market, you know? And I think there are some players who need to go. There's a big squad. and some players need to go. And if we can get some money in for those players, it might make it easier rather, to do another deal on the left-hand side. The question is who? Like, who is the player that's going to be available who really provides that big upgrade on the left-hand side? And I don't think there is a really outstanding candidate on the market. I know people have talked about Rodrigo, but I think that's a hugely expensive deal in terms of fee and in terms of wages. One I think I'd be surprised to see Arsenal doing after that. Everyone's talking about Aspirations, who I really love as a player, but I don't think he's a left winger. So it's going to be interesting to see what they pull out of the hat. I'd love to see Arsenal do something a bit out of the blue, you know. We've been quite, how would I say it? We haven't really expanded our horizons much in the market this summer. Like, trying to find that player who is a little bit of a bolt from the blue, you know, somebody you haven't been linked with, maybe somebody from France, somebody from Spain, somebody from Germany, who knows, who's not really a big name, but who might just come in and provide that something different on the left. So let's see.
You mentioned Eze not being a left winger in your eyes, which I feel like a lot of people probably do feel the same way. I want to cast your mind back to a player that you loved, or love, should I say, Samir Nasri, I say sarcastically. and I remember distinctly him doing a lot of good work on the left-hand side for us, and he was never a winger. And I'd place him in the same sort of mold as someone like Eze, to do a job to balance out the attack, where potentially you may play with two genuine forwards in your attack, you know, through the middle on the right-hand side kind of thing. And the more I watch Eze, which has been a long time at this point now, the more I see that sort of role being his almost, not final form, but in a way, in a top team, he can probably excel a lot more in terms of the way he links up, the way he creates chances. I mean, do you see that sort of interpretation for him, or do you see him more as you'd want more of a direct sort of player on that side?
I mean, listen, I think he can play there. We know he's played there. He's played there for Palace. He's played there for England. I just think if people are clamouring for a left winger, he is not a traditional left winger. Could he do a job for Arsenal there? Absolutely. Could he do a good job? I think so. And listen, I would not be complaining for 1 second if Arsenal went out and bought Eze, and part of the remit for Eze was for him to play on the left-hand side a bit. My contention is that at this point in his career, I think he is best through the middle. I think what he does in those areas of the pitch is really, really valuable. And if I'm looking at Arsenal and looking at some of the problems that we've had over the last couple of seasons, let's say with low block teams or moving the ball more quickly through midfield to provide those transition moments, as we saw for Kai Havertz, you know, the weekend against Bilbao, and the kind of goals that we're envisaging Victor Gyökeres scoring for Arsenal, I feel like Eze would be a really good way of addressing that. If Mikel Arteta thinks he's good enough to do a job on the left-hand side and also play centrally, then great, I'm all for it, you know. I just think he's obviously a really, really talented player. And I think at this point at 27, you know, he's probably keen to move to a club like Arsenal, to a big club like Arsenal, because not that it would be his last chance. I mean, if you're Eze this morning and you're reading stories about Tottenham being interested in you, you're probably just sort of crying into your cornflakes going, oh God, no, please. Why did Maddison have to get that injury? They could have just left me alone, you know. So I think it might be a case Tottenham throw some money at that. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. You know, I just think that if there is this need for something a bit different on the left-hand side, we're talking about a right-footed player on the left, like Martinelli, like Trossard. Madueke maybe gives you that something different because he's left-footed and what have you. But is Eze sufficiently different from those two to really change the dynamic of the team? I don't know. I just, again, I really feel like he's best in the centre. So I'm not saying you would waste him on the left, but it's just where I wonder about how Arsenal view him and his ability to fit in or add something to the squad.
Quick follow up on that.
Thank you.
Would you at least stipulate that he's a better footballer than the ones we currently have on the left?
I mean, you wouldn't get too many people disagreeing with that, but I think part of it is because of there's a sort of sense of fatigue maybe with Trossard and Martinelli, you know, who both did okay last season. They weren't terrible, but they weren't brilliant either. And there's a sort of inconsistency to both of those players, I think, that is part of why people want to see an upgrade on that left-hand side. I think Trossard has been a really good signing for Arsenal, by the way. You know, 25 million, 27 million, whatever it was we paid for him, and he's delivered goals, he's delivered assists, and delivered some things that we don't really have in the squad right now. Could Eze do? Is he a better player? I mean, probably, just with those few years, being a few years younger and having all of that Premier League experience. It is a tough one. I'd love Eze. I've said this many times. I'd love him, but I'm trying to work it out from an Arsenal perspective. What we want as fans and what the club want, or how the club view things, are very often different, right? So, for example, look at Madueke. Look at the reaction that happened online when Arsenal were linked with him, and fans were going crazy. But Arsenal have decided he's a guy that we want. It was the same with Aaron Ramsdale. When we were trying to sign Aaron Ramsdale, people were going absolutely mad. What are you signing this guy for? Arsenal stuck to their guns, and Aaron Ramsdale did pretty well for us until he got replaced, you know? So what we want as fans, I think Eze is kind of this golden goose character now, you know, that he is seen as the last missing piece of the puzzle, in the same way Gyökeres was before he signed, by the way. I feel like, you know, you could bring in Eze and then people would be going, now we really need to, if we could just do this, you know? I don't think it ends. I don't think it ever ends. Nobody's ever going to be 100% satisfied with their squad. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Just speaking of signings, the ones that we have made, you just mentioned Gyökeres. Another one, Zubimendi, who's been, you know, to my mind, the best player in pre-season. Who do you think, you know, will end up being the more crucial signing, just from our limited sort of observation so far?
Well, you know, the guy who's going to give you end product is Gyökeres. The guy who's going to give you end product is the guy who scores the goals, and goals win games, and everybody understands that, you know. Those players are hugely important for any team that wants to win things. You've got to have people who can stick the ball in the back of the net. So the obvious answer, I think, is Gyökeres in that sense. But what I do think is that what we saw against Athletic Bilbao, if that's a precursor of what's to come from our midfield this season, I'm really, really excited, because I think Zubimendi is real quality. The fact his signing was in the post for so long meant people were just like, yeah. When it happened, they were just like, yeah, whatever. You know, we know this. It's not exciting anymore because it's just been expected for such a long time. But I think he's a really, really good player. And I do think, you know, he's somebody that Declan Rice could benefit from. And I certainly think he's somebody who Martin Odegaard could benefit from, you know. That sort of idea that, you know, Odegaard didn't have a brilliant season last season. I think he struggled at times. I think in part of the reason he struggled was because we didn't have a centre forward for a long time. And if you're a creative player, then you need forwards, right? You need players making moves. We didn't have Saka. We didn't have Ben White, who he's been brilliant with for like 2 seasons, and we didn't have a centre forward. So you're playing, you know, Mikel Merino, who did well, Leandro Trossard, who did well, but neither of them are like traditional centre forwards who are going to make those runs that creative players really, really thrive on. So I'm hoping that there's a sort of knock-on effect basically all the way through from number 6, Zubimendi, to Rice, and we saw them interchange a bit, didn't we, against Bilbao, and that was quite interesting. But Odegaard stayed higher up the pitch, which I think is where you want him. You don't want Martin Odegaard dropping between your central defenders to pick up the ball because, well, who's ahead of him then, you know? So this is where I think there's a very interesting knock-on effect. So if it goes from Zubimendi to Odegaard to Gyökeres or Havertz or whoever's playing up front, I think we're a lot better off. So I think he's a really smart signing, Zubimendi, really smart. Like, City wanted him, Real Madrid wanted him, Liverpool wanted him for good reason.
Fuck
You know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But we've got him, and I think we should be happy that we've got him. And I'm really, really excited to see what he's going to bring to this team.
Absolutely.
Just a quick follow-up. I know it's very, very, very premature, but watching the way they both interchanged yesterday, was it yesterday? A few days ago, should I say at this point?
Saturday, yeah.
Yeah. I got a 4-4-2 vibes quite similar to the way we used to play in our glory years, where we had two central midfielders and neither one of them was quite holding. I mean, our most holding midfielder was Gilberto, if you like. But the way Vieira played changed if he was playing with Edu, because Edu's left foot was a wand. You know, he could do from anywhere, and you know Vieira could potentially stay higher up because of that. I see quite similar with our midfield options now, where we're between Rice and Zubimendi, and even potentially Norgard, Marino as well. That sort of interchangeability, everyone's comfortable pretty much everywhere in the first two phases. Like, I think that's a very, very like deliberate intention from Arteta. But do you see it potentially evolving to a traditional sort of, you know, two in midfield and potentially maybe even two forwards?
I mean, maybe it's certainly something we could explore in different game states, isn't it? Where if you need a goal and you're not going to take off Gyökeres and put Havertz on, you want both of those guys on the pitch at the same time. So it would require a bit of a shift. Whether we go 4-4-2, I'm not 100% sure on that. But certainly I thought there was something interesting Ethan Nwaneri said during the week when he signed his new contract. He said that he's ready to play anywhere in the front five for Arsenal. So that sort of suggests like one holding midfielder and, you know, four ahead and one striker, or 3 and 2, you know, whatever combination you want to make of those. So I think there is a versatility. You know, we have in Declan Rice, I think, a player who's, you know, most natural position. Yeah, but his natural position is like a 6, right? A deep lying midfielder, a holding midfielder. That's where he played for West Ham for so many years. But we've seen qualities in him that mean Mikel Arteta is playing him further forward. Similarly, Zubimendi is sort of viewed as this like, well, 6, he's going to sit there and he's going to just anchor the midfield and he's going to keep the ball moving. He's going to be this metronomic sort of functionary player who will get the ball from one side to the other, or get the ball forward between the lines and let those guys do it. But as we saw against Bilbao, sometimes Rice was playing in the 6 and Zubimendi was a little further forward, and I think his passing range and the speed with which he passes the ball is a real key to what he's going to bring to this team, because I feel like with a couple of the players that we had in that position previously, there was a tendency for them to hold on to the ball a bit too much, to slow the game down a little bit too much, and part of our problem was not moving the ball quickly enough, or holding onto the ball too long allows the opposition to get set, to get into a low block, to frustrate us. And we found it really difficult to break those teams down. So if part of the plan this season is to move the ball more quickly and get players into positions where they can move the ball more quickly, that idea of Rice and Zubimendi interchanging is a very interesting one. Not to mention the fact that Rice has, when he's sitting deep, a very good long delivery on him, which we haven't seen a lot of. I don't know if you remember, there was an article in, I think it was The Athletic. Remember they were showing how Declan Rice's game had changed. Or did he? Yeah, he did like an interview. And I think afterwards they were like, shut up, Declan. Don't be telling all this. You've given up too much information here. But the thing was, in West Ham, he was like pinging these diagonals left and right from the 6 position. And at Arsenal, he was playing those balls a lot less frequently because he wasn't in those positions as much, and because basically he was told not to do it that way. But I think what we could see maybe is him unlocking some of that a little bit more, with Zubimendi a little bit ahead of him. Again, it's all to do with phases of play and how things break down. But using the full extent of those players' passing ability seems like a really important thing for Arsenal if we want to get those players in behind. And we think about Saka, Martinelli, whatever people think about him, probably at his most dangerous when you send him in behind because he's really quick. Gyökeres loves to run in behind. Havertz, as we saw on Saturday, I'll give him the ball and he can run in behind. Where did that sprint come from? Like, he was just lightning, you know? So unlocking those abilities in our forward players, I think, is going to be a big part of what we do this season.
Very well said. I remember that Athletic article. He said something about Mikel liking to play the ball on the same side. So we didn't use a lot of switches. And I'm pretty sure that's the moment when they put a shot collar on him. Like, no more interviews for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Just real quick on transfers before we move to a different phase of this conversation. Andrew Mangan has earned a lot of plaudits so far. You know, bringing 6 people in as quickly as he did. You have to love that. But there have been no sales, no outgoings. We're notoriously bad sellers. So I suppose the question is, what will constitute a successful slate of outgoings in your mind?
Really good question. I think what we're looking at is, there are probably 4 or 5 players who I think could potentially depart before the start of the season. Zinchenko is one, Albert Sambi-Lokonga, Fabio Vieira, Reece Nelson, Karl Hayne, the goalkeeper, maybe even Jakub Kivior. That's 6 if we sell Kivior. That's 6 players going out. What would be successful, is getting a good chunk of money in for those players. It's easier said than done with some of them, like who's going to give you a load of money for Sambi? Nobody really,
Vincent Company?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know that Bayern Munich actually need him, but there you go. Yeah, you want to see him do some good deals. You want to see some good sales, because I think you're right. We have been relatively poor sellers. I think last summer was not bad, actually, in the grand scheme of things. You get 25 million for Eddie Nketiah and 30 million for Emile Smith-Rowe and whatever it was for Aaron Ramsdale, 20 million, 18, 20 million. We did all right in that sense. The difficulty is, if you want to get big money in for players, you're probably going to have to sell 1 or 2 you don't necessarily want to sell. And I think Kivior is maybe the one here where you could actually say what he did last season, his stock was high, he did really well. He played in the 2 games against Real Madrid, and everyone was really worried about that beforehand. And all of a sudden you come through a game against Real Madrid and everyone's like, hey, this guy's not bad, He is probably the one where I think if Arsenal want to bring in some decent money, he's the obvious sale. Like, I'd be happy to keep him. I think he's decent, but I think he's also at a point in his career where he might want to go and play regular first team football. So on that basis, you'd probably be looking at that one as maybe bringing you in 30 million, in the current market. After that, I think you're looking at smaller amounts for Zinchenko in the last year of his contract. Reece Nelson, very dodgy injury record. I've lost count of the number of times where people have gone, oh, Reece Nelson's on it, and then he gets an injury and he can't go anywhere. I think that's happened at least twice. Sambi, as I said, Fabio Vieira linked with Stuttgart. Arsenal looking for about 20 million for him. That'd be good if you could get 20 million for Fabio Vieira, I think. And after that, it's like, what else is there for Andrea Berta to do? The sales part, or sorry, the incoming part, I think is, I'm not saying it's easy, right? Basically, though, you just have to find a number that works for you and the other club. And if you're willing to do that, then yeah, you get that deal done. Trying to sell players who you actively don't want is always the most difficult part of the sporting director's job. So this is where I'm fascinated to see how the rest of this window plays out and what he can do,
We'll see where his Hermes belt takes us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Swap it for a Marks and Spencer's belt if he doesn't get any deal done,
Just on the subject of centre-backs, a position I'm sure long-time listeners of the Arsecast will know you're familiar with. Christian Mosquera. I love the look of him already. I said to Dean the other day, I think he's better than every single one of Chelsea's defenders, and I mean that sincerely. I think they haven't got a good defender between them, to be honest, outside of Hato, who hasn't played a game for them yet. What do you make of him so far? Like, what do you like? What are your worries? What do you see for him in the near future?
I mean, listen, I haven't seen a great deal of him. I've only seen what you've seen in pre-season. He looks pretty calm, pretty assured, quick. I think he came on against Athletic Bilbao at right back, if I'm right. I think he came on and Timber went over to the left. I can't remember exactly, right. But he came on there and then he played in the middle. He can play in both centre-half positions as well. He can play left and right. He looks quick. He looks physically, pretty good, pretty imposing. We do like a big guy in this team. Mikel Arteta is fond of collecting these big guys. We don't know what he's like yet from set pieces, whether he's going to be a goal-scoring threat there. But I think in terms of the profile of the player, we needed somebody, right? We asked way too much of William Saliba last season. Way too much. Saliba should not be playing EFL Cup games in the early stages, and we lacked that proper backup for him. You know, you could have made a case that Ben White or Jurrien Timber could provide that, and they can. They can both play centre half, but White was injured, and Timber sort of battled his way through the season until such point as he got injured again and needed an operation. So it was really, really important that we have that depth at right back with those two, but then we also have some depth at centre half, which means that when you get to a game in the EFL Cup early on and you're playing let's say a lower division team, you know, you're not asking Saliba to go out and play on a mud swamp of a pitch somewhere in Preston or whatever it might be, you know. He played too many minutes for me. And I don't think he would ever complain, but eventually it told, didn't he? Got a hamstring injury in the last home game and missed the last game of the season. So I think the profile is really good. He's played a lot for Valencia. Once he broke into the Valencia team, he didn't come out. He basically played every minute for them. He's 21. He's got imagine being a 21-year-old defender and you're coming to Arsenal and you get to learn from Saliba and Ben White and Gabriel, and you've got, Jurrien Timber in there as well. There's some really good defenders. You know, it's a great place to be, I think, for a young defender. He must know, I think, that his role is going to be a little bit less than it was at Valencia. But from my perspective, having that player as backup and competition for William Saliba is really important. And look, William Saliba's contract is not up in the air. He's still got 2 years to go, more or less. But maybe as well, from an Arsenal perspective, there's an element of future-proofing. You know, I'm not saying Saliba's going to go or anything like that, but I think when you're thinking about how you build your squad, you know, is now the time to buy a 21-year-old defender to come in who might develop and could then, by the age of 23, if Saliba doesn't sign a new deal, he's ready to step up? Or do you buy that veteran guy, the Squillaci, for example, who's not going to play a great deal, but, you know, is happy with his role, but ultimately, you know, if you're in that situation where you do have to replace Saliba, you're going to have to look at the market again, you know. So maybe there's an element of that. And I don't want to scaremonger or anything like that. Saliba seemed to be making very positive noises about his contract, and obviously, I hope he stays. But yeah, I think he's a good signing, and I'm curious to see, you know, how he develops over the course of this season and gets used to English football.
Well, we're definitely clipping the Saliba scaremongering part. Putting that on the socials.
Yeah, you're gonna get me killed for saying that stuff, but no, you know what I mean. It's I guess it is when you're building a squad. You're trying to. I'm not a chess guy, right? I can't do it. I can't play chess because my brain doesn't work that 2-3 moves ahead thing. But if you're a football club that's at least trying to be smart, maybe that's something you do when you build a squad. Think 2 or 3 moves ahead, and it's not a case that you're saying, well, because of this, then that. But if this, then we have that, you know? So
that's fair. Given how much injuries affected last season and what we've seen from preseason so far, how confident are you in Arsenal's ability to avoid? I mean, sometimes it's just luck, but how confident are you in our ability to avoid a season like last season? And when you look at the squad as currently constituted, which areas of the pitch strike you as sort of the potential points of failure?
I think that one of the big problems last season was lack of depth in positions and overplaying players. Saka, you know, everyone's talked about how many minutes he's played. He got a big injury. Havertz, do you remember the game against, was it Wolves last season, where that was the one where Lewis Skelly got sent off, right? And by the end of that game, Kai Havertz was basically on the floor. And maybe it was just bad luck that when we went to that warm weather training, he stretched to block a shot and pulled his hamstring, maybe, or maybe not, you know. And we didn't have Jesus at that point, and Saka had already been injured at that point, and, you know, there wasn't really a way of resting Kai Havertz. We didn't have the depth. I think we've got that depth now. So I hope that, you know, last season was something of an anomaly in terms of injuries. We had some really, really, really serious injuries, which had a big, big impact on our season, you know. Saka at Crystal Palace that time, you're just like, oh no, we don't have the player to fill in for him there. And Ethan Nwaneri came in and did a really good job. So I think part of what they've done this summer is build that redundancy into the squad, to make sure that we do have two players in every position, and make sure that, when we do have, when the games start really coming thick and fast, you've got Champions League games in midweek, and maybe you're playing in inverted commas, a lesser team in the Champions League in midweek, that you then have the faith to say, okay, well, we're not picking Zubimendi, we're playing Norgard, and we're not going to play Saliba, we're going to play Mosquera, and we're not going to play Bukayo Saka, we're going to play Madueke, and we're not going to play whoever on the left, because we're going to play Eze, right? So so it's those it's those things. It's like, if you're not going to play Rice at left 8, maybe you play Marino at left 8 for those games, and trusting in those players to be able to produce what you need to produce in those games. And then let's say you've got a Man City or a Liverpool at the weekend. Part of what you've done is hopefully you've won the game in midweek, but you've also kept your best players, your Sakas, your Rices, your Zubimendis, your Saliba, they're a little bit fresher and a little bit more ready for the weekend game. So this is the challenge for me, for Mikel Arteta, where he's talked a lot about the need to use the full depth of the squad, but every season it seems, for various reasons, whether it's his own, I think last season there were issues with numbers, basically, but previously he's tended to rely on a very small group of players. And that's been more and more true as the season's gone on. And maybe that's just a consequence of, like, as you get towards the end of the season and you're in a title race and every point is crucial, you go, well, I've got to play the best guys. I've got to play them every game. But it's about, I think this season, the big challenge is finding that balance between squad depth, rotation, using the full depth of his squad, and making sure that the best players, his most impactful players, are not, I don't want to say run into the ground, but not knackered, and that's going to be, it's not going to take a shift for Mikel Arteta, because they've given him the squad. You presume that this summer has been what he has asked for. I need 2 number 6s. You've got them. I need a good quality backup goalkeeper. You've got it. I need a good quality central defensive backup. I've got it. Those players are there in the forward line as well, with Madueke being able to play both sides. He's got that depth now. So he's got to use it, and hopefully use it effectively.
Yeah, I think you made a good point about rotating our options now that we've made those signings. The options weren't really there last season for numerous reasons, mainly injuries, obviously. And I think in those periods we struggled a lot against the fabled mid block, right? And we all know that one of the best ways to tackle those sorts of teams and tactics is dribblers, right? So do you see Arteta sort of shifting a little bit more to leaning into those players, getting the ball to Saka even more, which sounds crazy, but also potentially using the likes of, the babies, Nwaneri, and the literal toddler or fetus at this point, Dalman. Do you see him trying to lean into that a little bit more, or do you see him going about it a different way?
I mean, I think some of the business we've done, like, we needed a striker. Everybody knows we needed a striker, but we bought a guy who plays in a particular way, doesn't he? That direct running in behind, and that's where he scored a lot of goals for Porto. So that has to be part of the plan this season. So how do you attract a team that's going to sit in a low block? How do you bring them out? Do you concede possession to them a little bit? Do you then try and play more directly on the transition? But I also think Madueke is an interesting player to consider in this regard as well. That he loves a dribble. He loves to take players on. He likes taking shots in the box. You look at the stats, and all the stats tell you that he is a guy who really tries to make an impact in the final third with the ball at his feet. Takes chances. Maybe it doesn't pay off all the time, but that suggests to me that there is a willingness to try something a little bit different against these kinds of teams. Saka, we know, can make an impact. But yeah, I don't think there's any one way to unlock those defenses. There isn't just one magic key. You've got to try and do things a little bit differently. Again, coming back to how quickly you move the ball. And I don't just mean from back to front. I also mean from side to side. We don't need to mention horseshoes or anything like that. But that is sort of a consequence of facing a team that plays like that. Your job when they do that, you either give them the ball and retreat, or you try and move the ball more quickly from side to stretch the opposition. And we saw that, like, this is not just a problem for Mikel Arteta. This was a problem that Arsenal faced for years and years under Arsene Wenger as well, because we're a high possession dominance team. Think of how many games, in the final 15, 20 minutes, at home, where we have all the possession and all the shots and all the territory, and it becomes really, really difficult. And all you can do in that circumstance is try and pull them apart and try and find space for a shot, try and find a way through in whichever way you can do it, So it's not a new problem, but trying to find new solutions to that, I think, is part of why we've seen some of the deals that Arsenal have done this summer.
Well said, sir. We've enjoyed a lot of defensive solidity in the Arteta era, I would say. Mm-hmm. Do you think as fans we sort of take that for granted because we're obsessed with, trying to improve our attack, and part of improving the attack might mean taking on a little more risk defensively? Like, you're not the manager, but as a fan that watches the games and, our moods sort of vary based on what we're seeing on the screen. How much more risk defensively are you willing to take on when you watch these games as a fan? Like, is it one of those cases where we have really good defenders, we should let them defend a little bit more?
Kinda. When you look at who we've got, in those positions, it's very, very impressive. Do we need maybe to, like Arteta, I think he views a good defense as the platform for attacking properly. And we didn't see it last season, but we did see it in the previous season, where we had a really good defense and we also had a very, very good attack that scored a lot of goals. And we almost, won the title. We came within a point of winning the title. And I think we scored more goals in that season than the Invincibles. Am I right? So goal scoring and attacking wasn't an issue that season. Last season it was, because we didn't have the depth and we didn't have the players, and everybody understands that. So I think Arteta views that platform as a way of attacking properly. I don't quite know how you implement that risk. You know what I mean? Does that mean taking more chances when we're in possession before we get into the opposition final third? It might be. I do feel like sometimes we, in possession, are a little bit risk averse. But then part of that might be that we haven't had the runners. We haven't had players running the channels in the way that we do. And I mentioned this the other day. There was a good example in the Villarreal game where Gyökeres was making a run, Miles Lewis-Skelly was in possession and recirculated rather than looking for that pass. Now, it wasn't an easy pass. I'm not saying he absolutely should have made it, but I think those are the areas of the pitch where maybe if we try and make that pass and it doesn't work out, the opposition get the ball, and then we can rely on our defenders, and maybe the opposition come forward and they leave a bit more space in behind when we win it back. It's those things. I don't think you just sort of stand there with Saliba and Gabriel on the halfway line and push your fullbacks all the way forward and leave yourself exposed, because you will get ruined in the Premier League.
Liverpool.
Well, the Saliba and Gabriel are amazing, but there's only so much they can do. So you have to balance that risk, maybe by being a little more risk-taking in attack. You expose yourself defensively a bit more, but the trade-off of that might be more chances and more high-quality chances, because you're willing to take those chances, take those risks. And we have good players. We've got good forward players and very crafty, impactful forward players who we didn't see as much from as we should have last season. But I don't think we should be in any doubt that this is still a very, very good Arsenal team, and one that can, when it's on song and when everything's in tune, be a real danger to everybody. Think about the Champions League games last season, and that's your evidence. As disappointing as the league was, look what we did in the Champions League. And Part of why we didn't go any further, I think, was because we just didn't have the forwards, and hopefully that's something we've addressed.
Yeah, I think the main sort of takeaway from all that in terms of the risk genuinely is a bit more belief that sometimes, you know what, Ben White will be fine if you just leave him alone for like 30 seconds. Just throw a couple more bodies forward. You know what I mean? I feel like there's almost like mental shackles need to be a little bit released a little bit there. And we've shown it in the past, you know, so I think it's probably just about striking that balance back again. And the person responsible for that obviously is the coach, which there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, this season coming up, you know, it's potentially, you know, now or never sort of stuff, you know, a bit of anxious energy, if you like, you know. For you, what kind of season would have you sort of looking at his status as manager a little bit sideways, if you like, you know?
I guess it just depends how it all plays out. Like if we're really, really good again and we miss out on the title by a point or 2 points, like it'll be really painful and frustrating. But like in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not that he's done a bad job. It's just that somebody else has been a little bit better. So does that reflect more on Arteta, or does it reflect more on the team that finishes a little bit above us? You know, it's really all about the context. I think if we're in a situation where, you know, come March, there's nothing to play for, then I think you start to have some serious questions. But if we're in the mix, and if we're in the late stages of the Champions League, and if we're in a cup final, or, you know, we're still in the title race all the way until the death, you know, the final week or weeks of the season, it becomes more difficult. Like, I do think there is a very interesting discussion about, like, how long can you go? And, like, if we finish second again, how many times can you finish second before someone says, well, maybe there's something a little bit extra needed to get us over the line? The flip side of that, of course, is that you could say, okay, we need that little bit extra, and whoever you bring in, you know, takes you backwards. You know, there's no guarantee that bringing in a new guy is going to be the difference that gets you to the title. The new guy could be terrible for all kinds of reasons. He might be better, he might not, though. You've no guarantees in that regard. So I think the thing really to try and gauge is consistency. It's consistency of performance and consistency of results. 3 second place finishes, you know, it's hard, isn't it? You know, as a fan, you want to see your team win, and it's been too long since we won the title. But 3 second place finishes based on some of the stuff we had to endure previously is not bad, you know, but it is that balance between, you know, how you finish, where you finish, and whether or not you remain competitive. I do think there is an element of now or never, not quite make or break, but you know, Arsenal have made it pretty clear with their transfer business this summer that they are going for it this season, right? They went for the experienced striker. They brought in Zubimendi, who's 26 years of age. They brought in Norgard. They brought in Kepa, who's an experienced player. A couple of young players added in, and maybe there'll be another player. But even if, let's say you make everybody happy and you bring in Eze, what does that say about what your plans are for the season ahead? You know, he's 27. He's not a guy who you're going to develop, and if it doesn't work out, we'll sell him for, you know, 20 million, 30 million down. Like, if you bring in an Eze this season, you are saying, you're nailing your colors to the mast. We are going to try and win everything this season, and maybe for the next 2-3 seasons. And that makes it impossible to look at next season outside of that context. So it really is about how it's all going to play out, you know? I don't have the perfect answer for this, you know?
I'm nervous too, Andrew. I'm nervous too. You mentioned Eze again. He's been a presence on this podcast, a presence in all our minds this whole summer. And it begs the question, like, regardless of whether we get him or not, I'm wondering, like, Martin Odegaard is the clear captain and the main creative influence in the squad. Given the increased depth and the tactical variety available to Arteta now, do you think we ever get to a point where Arteta can put out Arteta's best 11 in his mind does not include our captain?
At the moment, no. At the moment, I don't see that. Like, how old is Martin Odegaard now? He's
26, I believe.
26. Okay, so, you know, still very much in his, you know, heading into the prime years of his career. Did he have a great season last season? No. Did anybody have a great season last season? Not really. Not really. I think Odegaard suffered from the injury, and I think he suffered from the fact we didn't have forwards, you know. I do think some of the discourse around him was overly harsh last season. He was the first to admit that he hadn't reached the kind of heights that he would like. But I've sort of liked what I've seen from him in preseason. I think he's going to benefit from having Gyökeres. I think he's going to benefit from having Havertz. I think he's going to benefit from having Bukayo Saka outside him again. So all of these things make me more confident that Martin Odegaard, the one that we see this season, will be better than the one we saw last season, you know, which is obviously a good thing. And if he's better than he was last season, he's going to play a lot of games. The question for me is Ethan Nwaneri. Like, is he the guy who's going to deputize or back up or provide cover or competition for Martin Odegaard? You know, I think it looks like that's the case at the moment. Depending on whether or not somebody else comes in. But right now, I think Odegaard plays a very important role, you know, tactically. He's the manager's eyes and ears on the pitch tactically, and he organizes things and he organizes the press in a way that not, you know, too many players can do. But I think it's fascinating now to think that this midfield, Odegaard, Zubimendi, Rice, all of them, 25, 26 years of age? 26? Heading into the best years of their career, and those three together, I think, are going to be pivotal for Arsenal this season. And injuries aside, you know, I don't see Odegaard not playing unless, you know, his form suffers again. And if his form suffers again, then Arteta ought to have the depth to sit him down for a little while. And sometimes players lose form. You know, it's not uncommon in football. What you want is the ability, when a player is out of form, maybe to give him a rest, or maybe to put him on the bench for a couple of games, and it just sort of refocuses the mind. How many times has that happened in the past? You know, somebody loses a bit of form, they come out of the team, they work their way back into it. When they get back in, they perform, and they're sort of back on track. You know, I talked about the burden that we placed on William Saliba last season. There was a heavy burden on Martin Odegaard as well. You know, when he came back from that ankle injury and he was out for 2 months. First game back is 98 minutes against Chelsea or something, you know, like one of those games where they played about 12 minutes of added time across the two halves, you know. So we placed a big burden on him without really giving him much of a break. And I think I think he will be better this season for sure.
Quick follow up on I guess it's more a Mikel question more than a Martin question, but I've long wondered why. I understand that he has chemistry with Bukayo and Ben on the right. I've long wondered why we don't just flip our eights every so often. Like put Declan Rice on the right, because he scores those goals from the right. That whip shot that he loves so much. And we've seen Odegaard do some magnificent stuff. I remember him assisting Trossard against Porto from the left. You know, you live closer to them over in England. And you see Mikel every so often. I remember you guys at the last joint podcast with AVP.
Sure.
The next time you see him, can you ask why he doesn't flip his eights? It's killing me, Andrew.
I don't actually have, you know, that kind of a relationship with him. I don't, you know, I can't send him a WhatsApp right now. You know, he was on stage for about 3 minutes and he came to thank the audience who'd contributed to a fundraiser, far more than it was to see me or anybody else in there. So unfortunately, I don't have the ability to ask him that question. It would be interesting, though, if that question were asked in a press conference. You know, there is
James, if you're listening.
James, yeah. There's plenty of the guys there who could, you know, ask that kind of a question. I think it's a pretty decent question as well. You know, maybe it's to do with structure. Maybe it's to do with the patterns of play that they train with. I'm not 100% sure, but certainly, you know, I think of that Rice goal against Chelsea, for example, the one that he hit from long range, where I think the goalkeeper made a bad pass and he just hit it first time. That was essentially where you would expect Martin Odegaard to be. And you're right about Trossard, that brilliant assist he made for Trossard against Porto, was when he drifted over to that side. So maybe it is something we see this season, that the suggestion that Arsenal have been a bit predictable, I don't think is without merit. So maybe there are things that he's going to try and things we see over the course of this season that address that, and that might be one of them. So let's see.
Yeah, I think us not flipping the eight, should I say, as consistent as you want, is more Arteta's, like he's mentioned, Arteta's just idea of how he wants us to play as well. And with the players that we have in those positions, I think he's trying his best to lean into what he thinks gets the best out of them, but also doesn't hinder the team too much. So, for example, Declan Rice driving with the ball from the left, I think it's slightly more, it's still scarier coming at you from the right, but it's slightly more scarier coming from the left because he's coming onto that wand of a right foot to potentially, hit a missile into the top corner. And with Odegaard, the pitch opens up for him on the right hand side. He can play every pass from that side. Whereas with the left hand side, he's a little bit more predictable. But predictable isn't bad, because if you're good at something, you're good at something. But I just think that's probably what Arteta's thinking is. But there's no harm in them switching up because teams, again, seem to employ every single sort of defensive tactic against us. Sometimes switching things up potentially could open the door, I think. But in terms of other teams, especially our quote-unquote rivals, out of all of the teams that will be up there this season, you've got the two cheating clubs in Chelsea and City, you've got Liverpool, and you've got that lot from down the road as well.
No, you don't.
Okay, who do you think probably has the will be able to push us all the way, potentially even be the ones to not allow us to win the league this year?
I mean, the two I would look at are City and Liverpool because they've been there, done that. They've got the experience. Liverpool appear to have bought really well this summer. If they get Alexander Isak, there's going to be a lot of people just sort of crying into their duvets when that happens.
It's all chest, no legs, Andrew. It's a lot of forwards, no defenders, all chest, no legs.
Okay, well, that's fine. But if you score like 130 goals, you can let in a few every game, Fair. That's the issue. So I think it's those two. I'm really fascinated to see. Defending a title is hard, so I'm curious to see how Liverpool do in that regard. And Man City, like Guardiola's never really done a kind of rebuild. He's never really stayed anywhere long enough where he has needed to do a rebuild. They won, 4 in a row, and then they fell away, and they've obviously bought players at the start of this summer, and they've got a kind of a new look team. They'll probably do some more business before the start of the window. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But they're the two I really look at. I know Chelsea, they buy all the players basically, which gives them a very deep squad and plenty of ability to rotate and everything else. They've got some good players. They finished in the top 4. They've got to contend with Champions League though next season. Last season they had the Conference League, and they basically didn't play any of their first team players in any of those Conference League games, until they got to the very final stages. They had essentially 2 squads. They had a Premier League squad and a shadow squad that they used in this Conference League thing. So they're going to have to contend with proper European football this season as well. But City and Liverpool are the two. The experience that you have of challenging for titles, and in both those cases, going the distance, I think is really, really valuable. And that's kind of what sets them apart from us. Over the last number of years, they have been able to get it over the line. We haven't yet. Hopefully this year will be our year. But if I'm looking at, any two teams, it's those two teams as the ones that are going to be the real challengers.
That's well said and very fair. Just some light ones to get us out of here, Andrew.
Okay.
I feel as if you're the right person to help us determine the proper hate watch rankings for the teams that we don't like. We know you hate Spurs, so we're going to leave them out of this.
Sure.
But I'm going to mention a team. We're going to start with Chelsea. Then I'm going to mention the next team. And you tell us whether you hate them more or less than the team prior.
Like, I hate the actual team, or just hate watching them. Hate the club, or hate like watching them play football.
The club, man, fuck them.
Let's go with the club.
All right.
Let's go with the club. Yeah, I
Okay.
wasn't sure about that when I composed the question, actually. But let's go with
Well,
that.
no, we've laid out the ground rules now. So that's,
All right, here we go. Okay, so we start with Chelsea. The next
Okay.
club is Sporting Lisbon.
less,
That's Manchester City.
more, for sure.
Barcelona.
Less than Manchester City, but what a poxy institution it is.
Such a bastard, honestly.
For all kinds of reasons.
Oh,
But
man.
less than Man City, yeah.
I didn't plan this, but Manchester United is next.
More.
Ooh, okay.
We
Bayern.
have a long history with Manchester United.
We do. And we see them this weekend. Bayern Munich.
Less.
Newcastle.
More.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, more. I mean,
they've done
listen,
well for themselves.
you know, if there was a sort of news announcement that football had joined forces with UFC, I think I fucking missed it, because that's basically what those guys are about.
Do you know what gets me about
man.
them as well? Is the fact that the media just seem to just not talk about it. Like,
Yeah, it's mad. It's like they're considered this sort of like, it's almost like, this is a team full of I think they're viewed like as a very British team because they've got an English manager, and obviously it's it is where it is. But you've got these like Brazilian thugs running around the pitch, elbowing people in the head, and nobody says a word about it. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, man. Unai Emery's Aston Villa. I don't think they're overtaking Newcastle here. But
No, less.
Okay. All right. So the way, if I'm recalling this correctly, it's Newcastle, Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea. That is our hate watch rankings according to. Oh,
Well, I mean, you asked me less or more depending on the one that came first,
right.
but not like my overall, which I can't really put into words at this moment in time. I'm an equal opportunities hater. I hate them all the same.
Fair enough.
So number one, Man City. Number one, Newcastle. Number one, Manchester United. Number one, Tottenham. Number one, Chelsea. They're all number one.
I knew this would be helpful. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
That's okay.
Coach, you want to take the next one?
yeah, I mean, I feel like we're just, we're stuck on the left here, to be honest. But if you could select one player from the past, right, and unfortunately you can't choose Thierry Henry to play on the left for us now. No disrespect to the current players there, but one player from our past that you could just pick. Who would it be? I think I know the answer to it already, but go on.
Absolutely know the answer to this. If you've been reading the blog or listening to the podcast for any period of time, you know 100% that the answer, and the only right answer here, there's only one right answer, it is Robert Pires.
Yeah. And the reason why I even noticed this is because your shorthand sort of website thingy spells out his name.
Yes.
So
yeah, our URL shortener. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just like, yeah, it has to be. And the amount of times you've waxed lyrical about him, he for me is one of the most underrated players in our history by a long shot. I think you listen to the way his teammates talk about him, managers talk about him, and it's like, how good he is, but also watching him as well and what he provided. I mean, I don't know many players of his style that could get you, in all comps, close to 20 goals and then match that also with assists. With his playing style, complete and utter unicorn, honestly. Just
he was great.
Wild player.
Yeah, great fun to watch. Really, really stylish. Even though he sort of ran like a constipated duck, he was just so brilliant and so clinical as well. People forget, like, he scored brilliant goals, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone score as many tap-ins for Arsenal. But that's because of like his anticipation, his awareness of what might happen, so someone else takes a shot, he follows it in, and there he is to tuck it home from close range. Just an absolutely brilliant player. I think if we had like peak Robert Pires on the left for Arsenal this season, I'm not a betting man, but I put a big chunk on Arsenal winning the league.
I agree. I think one of his most underrated goals is probably his header away at Chelsea in the Champions League. Like, it gets forgotten, but that goal sent me over. I was going nuts because I was like, wow, like, I was waiting for someone to deliver, and he did. And it came from Ashley Cole Cross, I believe. yeah, like he done it so many times. You look at the, you know, the running in 03-04 and how many goals he scored in that. Like all those 2-1 wins, he was scoring or assisting in most of those games. Like unbelievable player, man.
I just want to make the point, Coach, that I've called Robert Pires my favorite Arsenal player ever, and you've racially abused me in the chat because I didn't pick Thierry Henry like the rest of you. Okay? Now you're on the podcast with Andrew, all glazing Robert Pires. Oh, he's the best ever, but I had to suffer. He called me unmentionables, Andrew. Unmentionables.
Well,
okay.
listen, you know, I don't need to get into any kind of domestic argument here between you two. You guys work it out after.
Fair enough. Quick fire round to get us out of here.
Okay.
Top scorer this season, Andrew.
Gyökeres.
Top assister. Top assister.
Oh, top assister.
Oh,
sorry. Odegaard. Oh no, can I Saka? Saka.
Those are the only two choices, really. I'd say. Which of the new signings is most likely to challenge for Arsenal Player of the Season?
Zubimendi.
And which trophies are we most likely to win, besides all of them?
Oh, all of them was going to be my answer. I'm going to say the Premier League because we've come really close. And, you know, there's got to be within that group of players and the manager and the coaching staff a real desire not to be seen as perennial runners-up, you know? So I think there'll be real focus on the Premier League. I think we could win one of the cups as well. I'd love to see us win the Champions League, but I do think based on the experience that this squad has and the sort of sense that there's unfinished business in the Premier League, that's the one I'm going to go for.
All said. Coach, anything else?
Yeah, just thank you, Andrew, for joining us. I think this season coming up, we're going to there's going to be a lot of emotions flying, hopefully more positive ones. But I'm really just this is a message to the fan base in general. I'm really hoping that more than anything, you touch grass and tell your loved ones that you love them, because the discourse leading up in preseason alone has been maddening. So please, just keep a lid on it a little bit and just remember it's only football. You know?
Yeah. It's just something we dedicate our lives and emotions to at the expense of our families.
Basically.
It's just football, you know. No, I agree with you. I think there is sometimes an overreaction sometimes. You know, we've all been on the internet long enough to know that there is a lot of overreaction out there. But I think, you know, as you guys demonstrate, and hopefully we do as well, that there is a place for sort of measured analysis and criticism if it's necessary, and there's a way of looking at things and a way of talking about things that doesn't have to cross the line, which you see elsewhere. So hopefully there isn't any real need for that this season. Hopefully we just sort of win every game. People will find something to give out about anyway, but, you know, let them on. If they want to give out about us winning all the time, that's fine by me. And we'll just have to deal with, you know, how heavy is this trophy? Oh my God. Hopefully that's what we're doing, guys.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Andrew. Coach, you know what to tell the people.
Peace.
Hey folks, this is Dean from the Shirtless Plantain Show. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and follow us on all our socials. You can see them right beneath our recordings in every video. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.